Jose, how are you? Lovely to see you. Tad, Rosario, Caroline, Christian, how are you? It's really great to have you coming into this session today. This is a slightly different take on what we've been running over the last year. I think with everything changing so fast, we just felt that it was great to get panels together maybe once a month to sort of just discuss where we all are in mobility, because as we were just saying prior to the call beginning, our situations are all radically different. We've got 65 people signed up for today. I know that probably a lot of people will watch this on demand when it goes onto YouTube. But for those of you who are with us, if you would like to make a comment at any time or chip in with your own experience about what's going on at the moment where you are, then just remember in the chat box to switch the default from panelists to panelists and attendees, because for some reason Zoom's default is to only allow you to talk to the panelists. And if you want that to go to everybody, just flick down onto panelists and attendees and it will do that. If you are watching this on demand, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps to get recognition for our fantastic industry. It really, really does. It's one of the most powerful things you can do. So the session today, we're going to just discuss where we find ourselves right now, both in terms of what's going on with the pandemic and what's going on, more importantly, with mobility across the world. So this session, we are focusing on Central and North America and Europe. And next week, we'll be doing a session focusing on India, the Middle East and Asia. So for those of you who are live today, as I say, please chip in at any time. We're going to discuss all sorts of things, obviously. But if you've got a comment you'd like to make, or you'd like to just, add something from where you're sitting, then please go right ahead. Cynthia's going to join us in a moment. She's actually having a bit of a technical issue at the moment, but we will go ahead. I'm just going to briefly introduce this fantastic panel who, again, I'm so grateful for you all taking the time to do this. It is great to keep our industry connected with what we know is going on. And I think, given what we were just saying before the call as well, it's quite difficult to get information about what's going on outside of where we are. Our news media seem to be very, very focused on quite national issues. So, Sophia Bentic, thank you so much for joining us. Anchor Relocation. Louise Howe from Spencer Howe, thank you very much. Hello. Mark Hopesall from Cork Global, great to have you here. Cynthia Mearns, relocation.no, she'll be joining us in a moment. And Elaine Herry from EuRA Relocation. So I'm going to start with Elaine, if that's okay. Elaine, first of all, where are you sitting right now?
I'm sitting at home, which is just outside Barcelona. In EuRA, we cover Spain, Portugal, France, Italy, Netherlands, and Germany.
Your take on this is important because you must be doing so many comparisons, updates across your network. Roughly fill us in on what's going on and where.
Okay. Well, generally, in France, Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands, as far as COVID is concerned, it's generally very good news. The cases are plummeting. The numbers of cases are plummeting. The numbers of deaths from COVID are plummeting. The sort of concern and black spot on the whole thing is Portugal, where we have the Delta variant that's really taken hold. So much so that, in fact, Portugal have had to backtrack with their plan to reduce their restrictions. And Lisbon was actually last weekend in lockdown again, because cases there really are increasing significantly. And had I been giving you this report for Spain a few days ago, that would have been good news too. But in Spain, we are noticing, and probably this is the effect of it sort of being contagious from Portugal, but we're seeing the Delta variant now having an effect on Spain and cases beginning to increase. But the good news here is that this is not affecting hospital admissions, and it's not affecting, it's not as serious. So although the medical centres are a little bit overwhelmed at the moment in Spain and in Portugal, the death rate is not increasing, it's not affecting that. And now there's a huge race in all of our countries to get everybody vaccinated as soon as possible. And having made quite a slow start in Europe with vaccinations, I mean, it's amazing. And I only thought this morning, God, it's always impressed me how countries like Spain and Italy can react really quickly, you know, and adapt to things. And suddenly, because it's the young ones who are getting this, the Delta variant, you know, suddenly from having to make an appointment online, in Spain, they're now organising public transport to get busloads of youngsters to get them vaccinated without an appointment, you know. And I mean, I had my second vaccination last week in the Catalan Museum for International Transport or something. They're adapting all of these places to do the vaccinations. So vaccinations are going really well. I don't think we're as good as the States, but we're getting there. We're sort of, on average across our countries, we have about 37% of people with a double vaccination in Germany, 31 in Italy, 35 in the Netherlands, 30 in France. And now the race is to get those second vaccinations done and to get everybody completely doubly vaccinated. And the good news as well, from today, actually, we have a digital COVID certificate, which means that within Europe, if you've had your 2 vaccinations or you've actually had COVID, you can, with this digital certificate, you can move around Europe, which is good news.
That's yeah, that is a real step forward. And I mean, again, from what you're saying, it is, you know, what I've been hearing from colleagues all over Europe, that the vaccination program has rocketed ahead after the start. It's been really good. Cynthia, can I come to you next? Are you? Hello, lovely.
Of course. Hello.
We spoke a couple of times, and it's great to see you again. And so, tell us, where are you sitting?
So I'm sitting in my office in Stavanger, Norway. And I'm from Relocation, so Relocation AS. So we provide services to all of Norway. So just an update of the situation in Norway. Vaccinations here have been, unfortunately, a little bit slower than maybe most of the European countries. I think for now it's like 29% of the population that has been fully vaccinated, 20% who have got their first vaccinations. I just got a text message last week that I can go and book my first vaccine. So now they're vaccinating the 35 to 40 age group. Norway has been quite strict in terms of border restrictions since the 29th of January. So we closed our borders on the 29th of January this year, and it hasn't really opened up. And here I'm talking about then people who are relocating for work. So they haven't opened up for so much for people who are relocating for work unless they are society critical or business critical. But from 5th of July, so meaning next Monday, Norway is going to go over to use the same map that the rest of EU uses. So this would mean that a lot more countries would turn green, and so they would be able to enter Norway. So if people are coming to Norway from a green country, they can enter without a quarantine period, or if they can show that they are fully vaccinated and they can show the EU certificate that's linked up to the EU digital system, then they would be able to come into Norway without quarantine as well. So a lot of people are waiting for this D-Day, 5th of July.
That's really interesting to know, and we're going to come on and talk about that, because again, just prior to the call, we were talking about how things are moving, and obviously that's a very important part of what we're going to talk about today. Lovely to see you. Thank you for it so much. Mark, great to see you too. How are you doing, and where are you sitting?
I'm doing wonderful, Dom, and today I'm sitting at home. This week I was also in the office. I've been in the office probably 3 days a week since the start of this. We never shut down. We were considered to be an essential business, and so we've still had staff in the office. It has been a smaller staff, and as we head back to work, I think what we're going to be adopting is probably a request that people are in the office 3 days a week, with 2 days optional if they choose, if it's not an essential office position, that they may be able to work remotely. We're seeing a lot of that in the country. I think people have found themselves reasonably productive from home, and it's provided some decent balance. So the country is trying to get back to work. Wall Street is going to be demanding 5 days a week back in New York, so New York will refill. The technology companies are looking to get anywhere from 3 to 5 days. Some are going to leave it wide open, and people, it'll be interesting because businesses will use it as a hiring incentive if they do have a more open policy. So more to come on that. In terms of where we are, we've been very, very fortunate to be able to get a lot of vaccine out, probably ahead of most of the rest of the world. We certainly lagged behind in our response early on. We didn't believe in things like masks and distancing, and somehow or another, it perpetuated our issues. Once we put some masks on and got some vaccines in our systems, we were in much better shape. The good news is we've got probably 55% of the population vaccinated. The bad news is the rate of vaccinations is going down. And so getting to a 70% quote unquote herd immunity, if that's a good number or not, is going to be more of a slog than I think anyone anticipated. There's a lot of communications going out, trying to make sure people get correct information. There's a lot of rumor and everything else that's also found in social media that's just as prevalent as some of the facts that are coming out of the medical institutions. So we'll see what happens. In the states where the vaccination rate is under 50%, the COVID cases are increasing. And there's a fear that the Delta variant is going to hit hard this fall because we're seeing it in those states where it is over 50%. People are rolling around without masks. It's back to business as usual. There's a sense of optimism and a sense of relief that the country hasn't felt in a long time. And I'm truly hoping that everybody that's on this call will be able to feel that same sense at some point sooner versus later. It is something to look forward to.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you. There's so many things that you brought up there, which we'll come back to in a minute. But thank you very much. I hear exactly what you're saying about the vaccine hesitancy. Louise, can I come to you next? That kind of chimes in quite well. Where are you?
So I'm based in England, and I'm sat in my lounge, and sorry about my daughter's birthday banner, but I'm working from home at the moment still. We're doing pretty well with our vaccination program, like America. I think we've got about 77 million that have done the vaccinations. I literally just pulled it up. 32 million have had their second vaccination. You can go from the age of 18 now to any of the drop-in centres at any time. So we're down to 18s and over, so pretty much anyone. There was talk on the news yesterday about possibly vaccinating children. I don't know whether that will happen or whether parents will allow it. I don't know. As a parent, I also have mixed feelings about it. We've also got the Delta variant. It's going up. I think there were 370,000 children off school this week. I know from my own experience, all away matches for sports have been cancelled. And it's watch this space with that, in all honesty. Obviously, Elaine knows more about Europe, but we're allowed to travel now to the smaller islands, especially Spain. We can go there now. They're on the green list. I don't know how long that will continue, to be honest. Yeah, that's kind of, I was just scribbling some notes down here. Yeah, but luckily we had the furlough system all the way through. So initially I furloughed everybody, and then instantly went, actually, I need to bring everyone back. We had an awful lot of families just leaving to go back to their home country, left their keys with a friend. So we had to go in there, sort the removals, their personal belongings, literally everything for them. So that was interesting, challenging. And then we also had people coming in. So we were putting them into temporary housing where we could, where we were allowed. We were putting food baskets in there to allow them 2 weeks of food. We were sending them the COVID vaccinations, the PCR, the lateral flow tests for them to take. It's completely changed the way we do business, in all honesty. We were doing virtual tours for people. They were choosing houses based on virtual tours, and then coming over a month later and moving into a house they'd never seen. Very different. in my 25, however many years, more than I care to remember in the industry.
But this is one of the things that's been so fantastic. I mean, both in the full forum and in the thing that we did last year and the thing we did this year and all of these interviews, how quickly this industry responded to these extraordinary demands that were suddenly placed upon them. Thank you, Louise. We'll come back in a minute. Sophia, great to see you. How are you? And where are you sitting?
So I'm sat at home in Monterrey, Mexico. And the story here in Mexico is quite different to all of the stories that we've just been discussing. Mexico has been very lax and very relaxed with their approach to COVID, for my liking. We also have an issue here with government transparency, in terms of getting real figures. What I can tell you from somebody who's sat here on the ground is that it's still we're not business as usual. We're not back to how we were before, but there are no restrictions coming into Mexico, and there never really were. We don't have any quarantine. Our borders have remained open. Immigration never closed at any point. So it was interesting because we actually saw a wave of people coming in to do the kind of work from anywhere, thinking, I think working on a beach in Mexico would be a great place to work. So we did see a wave of assignees coming in under that kind of scheme. Around 37%, I believe, are currently vaccinated here in Mexico, but that's a government-run scheme whereby you can't just, I think the age that they're down to at the moment is 30 and upwards. It's not like in the US where you can go and just walk into a pharmacy or to a supermarket, wherever, make an appointment and get the vaccine. That's not the case here. It's all very much government run, so you don't get to choose the vaccine that you get either. We have interestingly seen a lot of people who are flying up into the US just to go and get vaccinated. So they'll choose the city that, Las Vegas or Houston is a big one as well. They'll fly up, get their vaccinations, and come back again. In terms of relocation, destination services, it did slow down a lot. The biggest issue for us is that schools still are not back. So we still have everybody, all the kids at home. And therefore, that's really put a brake on going back to the office, companies opening up again, because obviously, what are all the working parents going to do with the kids, right? So, but the variants are here, but it's not a case of, the hospitals are not full. You don't hear a lot of people now who, friends and family that are perhaps ill. It's interesting. I'm kind of holding my breath a little bit. And we didn't get any furlough schemes from the government at all either. So it's been tough.
There was no financial support at all, was there, in Mexico?
None, no. And obviously, because the borders were still open, we were still expected to be able to provide some kind of support. And that was a very difficult time for us because, as Louise was just saying, that these virtual home tours and things like this are, they were great tools. But when you've still got the option to fly in person and see the homes, it's very difficult because everybody has a very different take on how things should be done. And so making sure that clients are satisfied with the level of service that we're providing, even though perhaps you have assignees that come in and say, actually, I do want to have a face-to-face tour, but also, being mindful of keeping our staff safe, that then becomes a difficult balancing act.
It really is. It's fascinating. Thank you, Sophia. I mean, interesting that you say that the borders remained open. Was that the case for most of Central America?
Yes, I believe it was. South America is a different story. Yeah. South America, because we do quite a lot of outbound into South America as well, and that's very different. Chile, Peru, Colombia, they've all had very high peaks, and they've shut down visas. I would say in terms of Mexican immigration, perhaps the only thing that we've really struggled with is finding consular appointments outside of Mexico for people who have had their visas approved to be able to go and get those appointments before flying into Mexico.
It's just so different. I mean, this is exactly what we thought we would get from this conversation, that even within the EU. And so on that point of view, Elaine, I'd love to come back to you. What are basically what's happening across your network, and are there major differences between how mobility is moving across your different countries?
I mean, one of the consequences, I think, of this whole pandemic thing is that we got much better at communicating between our different countries. You know, we organized regular weekly meetings of the directors of each country to actually share this information. You know, where are you up to? What are your restrictions at the moment? How are things? I mean, the main differences really were around how COVID was progressing, and whether we could get people into the country, and when we got them into the country, what were the restrictions? You know, could we accompany them, or did we have to do virtual services? And as Sophia says, sometimes this was difficult. I mean, I remember we had a conversation with a client actually quite early on saying, you know, we won't be accompanying your employees on these home visits. We will actually be talking to them and doing them. And they said, this was right at the beginning, what do you mean you won't be accompanying them? You know, we pay for accompanied service. That they hadn't yet got to the point where we were regarding employee safety. So it was a bit of an educational exercise at the beginning. And then, of course, very quickly, everybody became very aware of the safety issues. But yeah, because Italy were way ahead. You know, Italy were way out in front. It all started in Italy. For Europe. So they helped us, you know, guided us through really, because everything just followed on, which is the worrying thing about the Delta variant now. It's in Portugal, the signs that the cases are increasing in Spain, it will come to Europe. So we can learn from each other. And I think that's how we communicated, we shared, and we learned from each other about how to do the best job in a difficult situation. And I mean, I remember in Madrid how things changed. We actually had an assignee buy a property in Madrid without seeing it. I mean, you know, that's got to be a first, right? You know, I mean, renting properties without seeing it. And I think the whole effect of this was people became less, you know, used to have assignees who were so picky about what color the bathroom suite was, and you know, and suddenly everything became a little bit more flexible and a little bit easier in some ways, and much more difficult in others.
Absolutely, but there's nothing like a global pandemic kind of take you.
A great leveler.
Thank you so much. And I mean, from the point of view of what's coming, well, we'll come back to that in a minute. Cynthia, you mentioned July the 5th. This is the big day for Norway.
Yes.
Are you seeing now, like, your backed up work looking like it's coming through?
Yes. So a lot of people are looking to come in July and August, but also in July is the vacation month for Norway. So Norway pretty much shuts down in July, and so even if we want them to come in, the HR personnel and they don't want the assignees to come in. So we're trying to juggle that for now. But then a lot of our assignees are looking to come as soon as they can, or maybe at the end of July. And those with families with children, they want to at least come by early August so that they can get settled in before school starts. And again, you know, we've also been changing our approach of doing things. We've been doing a lot of virtual viewings. We've been signing leases before the assignees have seen them, because they don't want to come here and stay in a temporary property before looking for something permanent. They want to move into something permanent straight away. So that's what we've been doing. But we've also been doing, for example, virtual inspections of properties as well before they leave, because there was a point here in Norway where people didn't want to have too many physical presence in the home. So then we did virtual inspections, virtual moving in. So we would go and we would have our face mask and just giving the keys, and then doing everything else on through video. So yeah, it's been a learning curve, but there has been some good coming out of this as well. I think in terms of efficiency, I see that we are more efficient as well in the way we do things. And again, we also see that some assignees are not as picky as before, because, you know, they don't really have that much of an option right now. And we thought that we would see a severe decrease in people relocating, but actually not. Now we're seeing an increase again.
That's amazing. I mean, that is amazing. And I mean, we've talked about this in lots of different environments, but that is, you know, one did think at the beginning of this, you know, what's going to change, you know, in the minds of the assignee, you know, how is this going to affect the psychology of your reluctance or willingness to relocate. Thank you. Mark, you're in over 80 places. What are the big what's happening? I mean, are you seeing work that's delayed come back? Are things on hold? What's happening in North America?
Much like what Elaine is seeing in the EU, we're seeing the same in the US in terms of domestic relocation back up. And so there's good movement there. We're starting to see some individual movement as well. I'll get back to that in just a second. In terms of planes landing, unless it's critical staff, they're not coming in yet. And like all of you, we're seeing not a lot of initiations have been canceled, and there's more coming. The projects will happen, but the borders aren't open yet. The planes aren't landing. And for all of our partners around the world, typically, if the planes aren't landing, they're not doing a whole lot, certainly on the furniture rental side, because domestic moves, people will very often move household goods, and there's not issues with getting those transported as there is getting those moved overseas these days. What we're seeing here, though, that's very interesting is what's happening with the demand for housing and how it's going to impact us. Couple of cases in point. Number one, homes in most metropolitan areas, there's been not enough going on to the market. There's been huge demand from the millennials looking to get more space for themselves and their families. They're working from home a little bit more, so they want more space. They're willing to take a longer commute, fewer days. And so in our area, for example, a townhome that's, not just typical townhome, nothing out of the ordinary. Had an open house one weekend. There were 31 offers on it that weekend, all of them escalating.
Wow.
So you've got that on the purchase side of the real estate. What's about to happen is going to get very interesting as well on the rental side. Within the US, we probably delivered 400,000 fewer apartment units over the past year due to various delays associated with COVID. A lot of the Gen Zs, millennials moved home. I'm a boomer. I had boomerangs. Okay, I had them come back home. It was great, but they're all going back out into. Our daughter moved into Washington this week. Our niece who is with us moved into med school. Our son's back here for a couple of weeks until he starts a job, and then he'll be gone. So all of these folks have been working, or at least many of them have been working. They've been collecting paychecks. Most parents, I don't think, are charging rent. If you could find one to educate me, I'd appreciate it. But I believe what's happening is you've got another whole population and 2 years of college graduates that are new hires in the market that may not fall under the traditional relocation category, that are all looking to go to work over the next 3-4 months. I think you're going to find very few A and B apartments available because people can afford them right now. They've got money saved. They're going to want to live someplace nice. And you've got all sorts of demand hitting the market at once. So from a snapshot here, looking 1 or 2 quarters in the future, I think it's going to become very interesting. And I think from a DS standpoint, we will really need to educate our clients before we bring them on as to what to expect and how quickly they're going to have to react if they're going to get something that they want.
That's amazing. And I mean, you're talking about, the main big areas of the US that, suddenly have property markets that are like Geneva, where if you don't buy it in an hour or rent it in an hour, you don't. So thank you so much. Louise, can I come on to you? Because I know that's a huge issue here in the UK. Do you want to comment on that?
I do. So we cover both sales and rentals, and we cover the whole of the UK. So we have a really good overview of the market. At the moment, in some areas, even as of today, you're having to go onto Facebook, watch a virtual tour. But before you can even allow you onto Facebook to watch the virtual tour, you have to complete an application form and pay money before you've seen the property, which is just crazy. And these are specific areas of the UK. But you're telling someone that you're having to ask your client to pay money for a property that they've never seen, which is just crazy. In the sales market as well, it's impossible, near on impossible, I should say, to get viewings. They still don't want to do it. And although we're now obviously doing face-to-face viewings with our clients and we have them in the car, is inventory clerks don't want to meet anyone still. So that's making it really difficult. So we're having to send the inventory clerk in early, and then we'll go and meet them 2 or 3 or 4 hours later and do a handover outside of in a recap of what happened in the property and what it was like. It's still very difficult.
Wow.
No properties.
Wow. I mean, certainly that, I mean, just, up here, we live about 2 hours out of London. And I got a thing through from Rightmove, which is like the equivalent of Zillow in the UK, saying property prices in your postcode have gone up by 45% since January. I mean, that's some sort of bubble, though.
Rents, do you know what? Who knows? I mean, we had the government abolished stamp duty until the 30th of June. So if you were buying a house, you didn't have very much stamp duty to pay. So maybe the bubble will burst with the purchase properties. Everyone was trying to get them through. But with the rentals, the prices are just through the roof.
That's crazy.
Really, especially London.
Fascinating. It's just fascinating. And I mean, so Sophia, from the point of view of what's going on with you in Central America, again, where are things in terms of volumes and availabilities?
Yeah, I think the story is actually very similar, and that's quite surprising to me, that we're all kind of seeing the same issues whereby, we don't have enough properties to be able to offer our clients. Everyone kind of comes in saying, oh, well, because of COVID, pricing must have come down. And I think a lot of people have the impression that coming into Latin America, it's very much an area where you can negotiate prices down quite a lot. That, the price that you see, the price tag isn't really what it's worth. And that's not the case at all. In fact, it's quite the opposite is happening. The prices are being pushed up. You want people now that, this is a hot country, want swimming pools, gardens, and in the city that's not something that's very common, and so it's been quite tough to manage those expectations, but yeah, I think the story is very similar to what everybody else here is saying. So Mark, I don't know if it's similar in terms of pricing as well. You said that the demand is there, but that's also happening, I assume, in the US, where it's pushing it up as well, the price.
The housing prices have gone up significantly. What was interesting is that the apartment rents took a big dive back in last spring. So New York City apartment rents were down almost 30% in Manhattan at one point in time. Okay. They've all come back. Not only have they come back, but we're expecting between a 5 and 7% increase in A and B properties, and it may not be enough. I know the vice president of one property management company, they were trying to rehab a building. And so in order to get people out, they raised rates like 20%, and people paid it. They wouldn't leave. So there's demand that we just never have even seen before.
Right, and impossible to predict as well. I mean, you're in the situation where nothing. We run our projections on the predictability of markets. Mark, thank you, Barry, for your comment, for your question. This alludes to something that we were talking about before the start of the call. Barry says we are seeing HHG's volume for both domestic USA and international overbooked through the summer. There's an issue booking moves in July and August, if not already pre-booked. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, we're seeing it too. I'm going to go to one. We're certainly seeing it with our clients and their ability to get comfortable in their homes. So it's a huge issue, and it's forcing a decision to either go into longer term temporary housing. Certainly, we've got a lot of folks that will rent furniture from us to fill the house if they're able to secure it. But the bigger issue that you're going to see with this is going to be on cost. So shipping a lot of furniture, which we do, if you go back 2 years, the cost of a container from Asia to the US is probably in the $1,500 range. Right now, we've seen it hit $19,000 for the same container. 19,000. And you have to throw elbows to get the containers on the ship because the large companies with the big contracts, the Amazons, the Walmarts, the Costcos, the others, have got priority. Okay. And in talking with multiple RMCs, the single individual household good move, even though there's a lot of it, it doesn't have the same priority in terms of getting on the boat. They're often the last one on. And so the knowledge of when something is going to arrive is tough. Then you get it onto the sea. And if you don't have a Suez Canal issue, okay, you wind up over in Long Beach where they're stacked up in the water for 10 to 14 days waiting to get to port. And then the product sits in the port waiting for a truck because we don't have enough chassis to carry the containers. The intermodal system is overloaded with trains. And so all of those things, when it involves shipping from another country that can't be done over the road, it is just a mess. And we're seeing timeframes that, you know, what used to be 6-8 weeks is now 4 to 6 months if you're lucky. And it's terrible for the assignees because they're expecting X and their experience is so far from what it was 2 years ago that at every step of the way.
That's incredible. I mean, the price driver is extraordinary. I mean, from that point of view, it strikes me that, you know, there's a golden opportunity. You know, I mean, part of your network obviously is furniture rental. That's got a bit. I mean, you know, with these kind of delays, if you're on a 2-year assignment, you don't get your stuff for 6 months. There's got a bit. But even when we were saying about, you know, shipping personal effects using FedEx and DHL, you made a very interesting point there too.
Yeah, FedEx, I mean, there's still shipping, okay, but they have been overwhelmed with demand for their services too. And what's happened, I can't speak for the rest of the world. It's been a while since I've gotten beyond our borders, but we have just a fleet of Amazon trucks rolling up and down the streets here. And drivers, okay, drivers are impossible to come by. You're going to see the wages for folks that are driving vehicles go up potentially 30% just to get good people on board that will do the job that you need to do. And trying to get that group of folks in to meet the demand that's coming is very challenging for us right now. We're working very hard at it. But there are a combination of things, everything. I mean, it won't always be 19,000 for a container, but it will never go back down to 1,500 for a container. You're going to see it come, you know, 3,000 plus or minus once equilibrium hits. Drivers, okay, retail is different now. Okay, drivers are in, stores are out. There's going to be changes in demand for folks like that, and it's going to have ripples, a lot of ripples within our businesses.
No, absolutely. I mean, Elaine, we were saying that you're not being so affected by this in terms of the fact that obviously across your network, all of that shipping is taking place by road, right?
Well, within Europe, the moves within Europe, yeah. But I mean, we have to organise such a complex logistical exercise, don't we, really, when you consider that you've got all these complications with the household goods, the immigration, which in 1 or 2 of our countries was very, very affected, European immigration as well as non-European, delays in getting things done. And all of this has to tie up. And then, of course, COVID complicated everything. So the need to be in very close communication, to be flexible and to be ready to change people's temporary accommodation from when they wanted their lease to start, when their furniture was going to arrive. I mean, you know, luckily we're always doing this to a certain extent, but I think during COVID we had to become a lot more agile, you know, in taking every single move on its own merits and what we could do and what was the best way we could deliver the service to that particular assignee at that moment.
Yeah, and that shifts everything because, like you say, you start, you know, this industry was complicated enough.
Yes, it's complicated enough in normal times, no, to get every bit of it right and it all slots in and it all works perfectly. But in COVID, it was very, very complicated. And as far as housing prices were concerned in Europe, I mean, we saw, I would say probably more than prices dropping or rising, we saw increased negotiating power. You know, we had more power to negotiate with landlords to get things done, and little bits of reductions during the peak of the pandemic. But really prices have bounced back now. And we also had a bit more availability in some of our countries, because short-term accommodation was changed to becoming long-term accommodation. So that increased the availability. But it's not easy to find properties for everybody now. And also people's demands have changed. They want more space in their apartments because they're working from their apartments. They want outside space. They have to have a terrace in temporary accommodation as well as in long-term accommodation. People wanting to move outside of the center of the city, I think, has become a trend as well. So it's just changed so much in so many ways.
Absolutely. Louise, you were nodding in agreement there. That's obviously resonating with you.
Yeah, so we obviously do the temporary housing as well, and the requirements are very different. It must have a desk, or it must have a second bedroom with a desk. We haven't seen a huge amount of moves into London. A lot of people are thinking, actually, there might be another lockdown. We want to be out. We want to garden. We want to be near parks and stuff.
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
Again, that market. And Cynthia, is there a similar story to that going on across Norway? I mean, I know you're in Stavanger, but
yeah, well, and not so much here, because here, even though people are in apartments and they can still go out. So I mean, even though we've had border restrictions, but the actual restrictions within Norway have not been that bad. People could still go out, and then the schools were only closed for a couple of weeks last year. Schools have not closed this year. They've just gone to different levels, yellow or red, and then they've just worked on that. So in terms of looking for temporary properties, temporary housing, that has not been so much of an issue, that they want a balcony or they want a garden, because you're still allowed to be out here. So we don't see that. But we see a lot of what has been mentioned earlier today as well. The rental prices are increasing in most of the major cities. So Oslo, Stavanger, Bergen, we are having problems finding houses for people, because then the Norwegians are not relocating as well. So usually Norwegians would have their houses out for rent when they move to some other country for an assignment, but that's not happening at this point. So we're struggling with that.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, Sophia, from that point of view, I'm fascinated to know, because you mentioned the whole, working from anywhere thing, and people coming into Mexico. Those properties, which I would guess would have traditionally been in the Airbnb realm, are suddenly going into the long-term realm. Is that changing how and where people are living?
Yes, temporarily. I'm not sure how long that's going to last. I would definitely say that apartments, there are just empty apartments everywhere. Nobody wants to be in an apartment unless you're really on the beach, somewhere that's, somewhere where you can immediately just leave and you've got some open space there. But it's just so hard to tell what's going to happen going forward. But we still have a lot of assignees we actually have a lot of clients who have had issues with their staff, especially tech firms, that they didn't know where they were. And I know this has been a conversation in the mobility space, where we've perhaps gone to renew a visa and they're actually not even in the country. They've gone somewhere else and they're not aware, or they've contacted us because it actually turns out their assignee is in Mexico on the beach and they didn't know that. So that's been interesting as well. And I think that talks a little bit to what Elaine was saying about, for us connecting the dots. And there's a limit to we look at the destination services, household goods and immigration side of things, but there's so much more to it than that. And I think that at least for us here in Mexico, what's been very difficult is that what they see on the ground is very different to what we know is happening in other countries. And so connecting all of those dots together, so when they can arrive in their temporary housing, and then we had a plan to get them perhaps into a property and the household goods haven't arrived, and what that then means for the family, and that then changes other plans. And we've found actually that a lot of our clients are finding that quite difficult to grasp, and they're sort of turning to us and saying, why didn't you see this coming? Or, you're meant to be helping us have this smooth landing. But at the moment, as we say, this is COVID. It's really so far out of our control. But we have had clients that have said to us, the pandemic is not an excuse. And you kind of look at that and think, how, just because you see around you that everything looks very relaxed, that doesn't mean that everything is going to work, as normal.
No, absolutely. I mean, there are no crystal balls going on here at all, and it's crazy to expect that there would be. If anybody has any questions or comments they'd like to make, please put them into the chat box. It'd be great to hear from you. One of the things, I know it's stupid to kind of think, well, what is going to happen, because we simply don't know, but I'd like to try. From the point of view of, first of all, things like our quarantine arrangements, I'm going to start with Louise, if I may, because we had a conversation just yesterday, actually, with our venue for the Members' Day event that we're hoping to run in London, and that hotel has just been designated a quarantine hotel. Are there any indications, Louise, on which countries will stay on that red zone, which means you have to go into 2 weeks quarantine? Do you know anything?
I think that depends on the variants, and at the moment it's the Delta variant. It's on the increase. For our clients, what we've done is prepared a document, and it's just lists the red, amber and green countries, because that's changing almost on a daily basis. So we're not listing the red countries or the green or the amber. We've just prepared this document for them, and what they need to do, because it's different from every country at the moment. And I don't know what's going to happen. I wish I did. My life would be so much easier.
It's very interesting, because there's been there's been a lot of debate across Europe about, the variants and closing borders. And Angela Merkel was suggesting that Europe should look at keeping the variant as down as possible. And I have to say, I think that is the most sensible thing that could be done. But Elaine, can I come to you, because there are so many logistical issues with that. I mean, you have the enormous amount of tourism coming into the Balearics from Germany and from the UK. Those people are not separated from each other. It's
a constant ongoing battle, especially in Spain, Portugal. It was mainly Spain and Portugal, Italy as well, that getting the balance right between the economy, tourism and the health situation. And every day on every news program, you have a health minister arguing it out with an economics minister. And, they're tearing each other to pieces and getting nowhere. But, the Balearics, which is open for people from the UK without tests, without vaccination, anybody can come, because they were so desperate for tourism. But now there is actually a particular centre of the Delta variant in Mallorca. And it started in the UK. So that's how, it's obviously going to come. I think the saving grace is the speed at which the vaccination program's going. As long as people are double vaccinated, I think we're in a better place than we were last summer. And also, you have to remember, in these Latin countries where summer is for young people to just get together, whether it's on the beach, at a concert, at a party, in the street, huge crowds of people. I mean, the Spanish and the Italians and the Portuguese don't want to be by themselves. They don't want quiet or peace. They want, huge groups of people together. The more they are, the more the merrier. So it's the time when anything will spread very quickly. So they all of our countries, every country needs to get everybody. And we're on most of our countries now are vaccinating the 16s and over. So, they really are stepping up to the challenge. And I think that will be the saving grace. But it's not easy. Nobody's got the right answer. And I mean, I've heard today that the UK is considering, because I'm waiting to go to the UK, is considering letting people in with no quarantine as long as they have 2 vaccines from the 26th of July. Now, whether they will confirm that or not, I think we're waiting for Boris to give some kind of announcement at some point.
Elaine, sorry, Dom, one thing about the Balearics, and actually I've literally just booked flights today. So I can
good luck with that.
That you have to have a clear COVID test within 72 hours to go there. And when you're there, you have to have a clear test 2 days before you come back to England.
Yeah.
As
But
of
I think
today.
this has been quite recent, actually. I mean, at first it was, just let them come. I mean, they were so desperate to get the British people there, which was the same, I think, for Portugal. But then, of course, Portugal had their Delta variant problems and backtracked. So it's constantly changing situation. I hope you get there. I hope you get back.
19 days to go.
Let's think positive.
Yes, I'm trying.
Cynthia, can I just come to you, because when we were emailing, you mentioned the fact that you're trying to go home to visit your family. There's a very different set of rules in place, right?
Yes, so I'm originally from Singapore, but I've lived in Norway for 13 years now, and I haven't been back in Singapore for 2 years. And I would love to go back, and I can go back, but the issue is that if I were to go back, I have to go into a 14-day quarantine hotel. And in Singapore, when you go into a quarantine hotel, it is like a jail, because you're not allowed out. You get called every day. You get a video call to make sure that you can show your surroundings, that you are inside the hotel room. So it's not like here in Norway, when you go into the quarantine hotel here, you can go out, you can go to the beach, you can go to the park, and nobody controls your comings and goings. So it's not really, it's very different. So that has limited me from heading back home. But yesterday I actually saw an article in Singapore that they are thinking about changing the approach to COVID-19, because Singapore as a country can't deal with closing its borders constantly as well, because Singapore is a hub. It's an international hub, and we need people coming in, we need companies coming in, and we need foreigners coming in. And so what they're planning to do is to look at living with COVID-19. So with the fact that in Singapore the vaccination program is going really well and really quickly, so if most of the population is vaccinated, then hopefully even if people get sick with COVID-19, it would be a mild case, and then you would be able to survive, that you won't have the long-term, you won't have the serious effects of the disease. And then we can continue about life as per normal. Of course, then, you still use your face mask and antibac for your hands. But that looked very promising. And I'm thinking that would be the way that the world has to go too, because closing the borders for so many countries and having so many different rules in place, it's not conducive to anybody. And we see here in Norway, the border control police, they get confused with their own rules. They don't even know what's right and what's wrong anymore. And then especially where every time the rules change, border control gets confused. So some people get let in, some people are turned away, and then they don't really know what they're doing as well. So I hope really that all the countries in the world will move towards learning how to live with COVID-19.
Absolutely. It's so interesting. Right at the beginning of this, I was talking to a very dear friend of mine whose cousin is the head of NHS England, who was saying there is this balance between, on the one hand, you have the medical profession saying the only way to keep everybody safe is to keep everyone at home indefinitely until this goes away. And on the other hand, there is the notion of we have to handle this, exactly as you're saying, Cynthia. So thank you.
And we have so many mental health issues here in Norway with the young people. That's also another issue, And we have old people that have said, last year and this year, that they would rather live 6 months lesser if they could see their family.
Yeah.
So,
Mark, very interesting questions come through from Jose. Thank you, Jose. With the challenges, I'll start with you. With the challenges and delays on shipping, are you seeing greater demands, all of you, but starting with Mark, for furnished property? And if so, is this even possible?
Yes and yes. And let me cite a couple of examples. Number one, we do some work with Airbnb here, and they published some data recently. Apparently, 24% of their rentals during the first quarter were for 28 days or longer.
Yeah.
So I never expected to hear a number like that. So that's one piece of it that you can say, yes, it is happening already. Certainly, we're used to furnishing homes from, for everyone, short-term, long-term, in between. It's part of our business. So if there is a vacant property, if it is getting very tentative, getting household goods over in a timely manner, some people are turning to us and going, just do it, just make it go away, and we'll save part of that problem. I think the third piece that is an issue is that corporate housing used to be very significant within the United States. However, as the pandemic hit, their clients disappeared and they were left in a very, very difficult financial situation with the properties, with everyone. And so the amount of corporate housing, traditional corporate housing that's on the streets is at the lowest level I've ever seen. And I've been around for way too long. So in terms of them ramping that back up, you've got the issue of availability of apartments and of course the cost of those. And then you've got the risk issue, that is, how much am I willing to commit on a longer term lease if my resident is only going to be there 60 days to start with? Can I get a 60-day lease? Maybe, but it's going to be very expensive. And so the years of master leased units that were then sublet, those are behind us right now. And we've got folks that are trying to use each other's inventory, but in terms of the inventory that's in the marketplace today and the ability to rapidly expand that inventory on a corporate housing side, I don't know how easily that can be done.
Huge logistical challenges. Sophia, have you found the same thing? I mean, because you mentioned the fact that obviously at the moment, the way that policy is structured, you will get your HHG delivery, but it's taking 6 months and costing $19,000. Is there a way that you as providers are able to kind of influence that policy and say, look, it's actually going to be better for these people to be in furnished?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that that's why communication is so just important, as it has been throughout the entire pandemic, speaking to our clients, speaking to HR and talking to them about the trends that we're seeing. We've certainly seen a big demand in furnished properties, and in Mexico, at least, it's not something that's particularly common. Perhaps 20% or so of the entire inventory is furnished. And so then we turn to partners for furniture rental, but of course, then that sort of pushes the price up. And then, of course, you've still got clients who have a policy that will not allow Airbnb and these types of setups. You know, they want something that's more corporate housing based. And at least here outside of Mexico City, that's very difficult to come by, very, very difficult. So it's definitely a challenge. And but as I say, I really do think that communication is the way forward. And also, you know, having clients who are going to be willing to look at their policy and say, okay, this was our policy previously, but we need to revisit this at the moment. And I think for at least for us, that's a challenge, because a lot of the HR that we've got here in Latin America actually report to other countries. So, you know, the HQ may be in the US or in Europe. And so they're saying to us, well, we can't change the policy because, you know, IHQ is telling me this is the way it has to be. And we're saying, yes, but, you know, this is an issue that we have to have a solution for it. And this is the solution that we think is the most viable. And so that conversation is still continuing.
And Louise, I mean, the kind of ratio of furnished to unfurnished in the UK, I have no idea. I'm assuming it's similar to Mexico.
There's more unfurnished.
Yeah.
There's more. So the 1 and 2 bedrooms, probably a 50-50 call on, you know, furnished and unfurnished, but anything bigger than that tends to be unfurnished.
Yeah.
Just because of the fire regulations and everything else.
Of course. But I mean, going back to Sophia, what you said about expense, that $19,000 container buys a lot of compliant furniture rental, right? I mean, Elaine, how are you finding that across your network?
I mean, people coming for any length of time usually want to bring their own furniture. Generally, I would say, have we seen more short-term assignments recently, whereby the assignees were looking for furniture? Maybe in the Netherlands we have. It's a tricky one to answer, Dom, across the different countries, because it varies. But yes, is this something that clients will start to question now? And I think as a result of this pandemic, we do have a more sort of collaborative approach with many of our clients and assignees. You know, we're talking about the best way to do things more than we were before. So, you know, our advice, you know, probably be a good thing to suggest maybe for cost savings. You know, have you thought that a furnished apartment may be a better option? And in some cities, they're more available than in others. So, you know, it would be probably a good option, I would think, in some cases.
Listen, we are at time. That has been a really fascinating discussion. Thank you to all of you for contributing that. I think we need to kind of do this because it's changing so quickly, and none of us really kind of, you know, we're all trying to work in our bubble, but we also work in an international environment. So thank you so much for your expertise. Thank you so much, Sophia, Elaine, Cynthia, Mark and Louise. I really am grateful for your time and your expertise. For everybody who's attended today, thank you to you as well. Next week on Thursday, the 8th of July at 12 o'clock Central European time, we'll be running the same briefing, Middle East, India and Asia and Australia, to find out what's going on with our members across there. So in the meantime, though, thank you so much, panel, for taking part. Thank you to everybody for attending today. This will be edited and put up on YouTube by Monday. So again, if you want to distribute that to anybody, please go right ahead. But thank you so much, everybody. And have a great, I'm sorry that we're not in a nice conference room somewhere where we could now go and have a glass of wine, but never mind, it will happen again soon. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking part.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.